new season that has opened so soon after Christmas. Help us this year embrace this time of thoughtfulness. Amen. So let me begin with a little bit of fiction. It begins with a memorial service for a young woman, a wife and mother with a successful career who dies decades before she should have. Several of her friends come forward one at a time, and they deliver reminiscences and reflections on her life. They say she loved life, loved her husband, loved her children, loved her job. They say she loved her garden and her friends and her church. And one of them, departing from the norm, comes to the lectern and says, 525,600 minutes, moments so dear. 525,600 minutes. How do you measure a year? How about love? I imagine many of you recognize that comes from the Broadway musical Rent. And this cast is a company of young adults living on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, each struggling to make it or at least survive. I mean, they're musicians and they're composers and dancers and social activists, and all are struggling to find out what life is all about and to pay the rent. And several of them have HIV/AIDS. One in particular, named Angel, is very sick. Several of them attend a support group, sitting in a circle in an empty community center gym, reflecting on the future and what it will mean for them. One young man quietly asks, "Will I lose my dignity? Will someone care?" It's a brave and poignant story of people living with a fairly high degree of alienation, from family, from society at large, hanging on to one another for support and friendship and encouragement and love. They are, all of them, literally rent, meaning torn up. But they're also family. And on occasion, they even become something like church for one another. They ask for themselves and for all of us, will someone care? They ask questions about meaning too. How do you measure a life? How about love? And so we begin a new Lenten season, the traditionally somber season before Holy Week and Easter, a time when Christians remember the story of Jesus and his love and turn naturally inward, reflecting, doing self-examination. Well, I began that Wednesday by going to an Episcopal church close to my home to receive the imposition of ashes on my forehead because I appreciate the reminder that I am mortal. This year, Ash Wednesday, coincided with Valentine's Day, so we have the theme of love heightened this year because it's set against the background of our mortality, the fact that time is short and therefore everything, especially love, is all the more precious. 525,600 minutes. How do you measure a life of a man or a woman? In truths that she learned, or in times that he cried, in bridges he burned, or the way that he died? Let me say a word about that last one. The way that she died is actually the way it comes in the song. You might know the name Catherine Coulson. Well, Catherine was an actor who I imagine many of you might have seen at Oregon Shakespeare in Ashland. In a long career among many roles she played, the best known of them was the quirky log lady on David Lynch's television series Twin Peaks. For those of you who didn't have the pleasure of seeing her in that, she was the oddest one in the odd little town of Twin Peaks. She had this habit of always carrying a small log around in her arms as if it were a baby. and she seemed to share a psychic connection with it, often dispensing advice and visions she insisted came from the log. Well, Catherine was a good friend of mine. She died about 5 years ago at the age of 71. I heard about her passing from mutual friends and found the following information in a news piece noting her death. Allow me to quote from it directly. Here it goes. It says, "Imagine the surprise of the answering service at Litwiller Simonson Funeral Home when they found this log of a call Catherine made to the office 48 hours before she died." She says, "Good evening, this is Catherine Coulson." That's Coulson, and the Catherine's with a C and an INE. "I don't know if you've been contacted by anyone else, but I wanted to alert you to a pickup I'll need in the next day or so. I've never died before, so I'm not exactly sure how long it will take." "Oh, Miss Coulson, I'm so sorry to hear this," said the person answering the phone. She said, "I do appreciate your compassion, but we all have to die sometime." And the representative said, "Would you like the funeral director to call you back?" And then she said, "That won't be necessary. Is there any other information you'd need from me, though? My social security number, my address, my age." I know it sounds just a little odd, but I know that she did that out of total love for her little family. She imagined how hard it would be for them to make that call and decided she could do it herself. The Greek Stoic philosopher Epictetus is remembered to have said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters in life." Well, Catherine Coulson knew how to deal with the good stuff in life, and she also knew how to deal with all the rest that a relatively long life will throw at you. She didn't squander a moment, as far as I know. She was a wonderful actor. Thinking back on her life in the theater, in television, and film, it occurs to me, she never had a really big part. What she had were a succession of these little quirky character roles, one after another, like the log lady. She told me once how much she adored being cast to play the gravedigger in Hamlet in her 60s. The gravedigger scene is all of 5 minutes, but every word in it is pure Shakespearean gold. I mean, in a play where the main character says to be or not to be, a scene shared by Hamlet and a gravedigger has got to be seminal, and it is. Now, think about your life and mine. Our lives are full, of these little quirky roles we play. I'm talking about those highly defined little moments when we are with our loved ones, or maybe little moments in our work days, that just end up shining, even though we don't know that's going to happen. For example, say we've got something the people we work next to count on us to do. And we know that they're counting on us to do it with our unique talent, our particular care or panache. And because we know that, we know what they expect. We do it, and we do it well. Or maybe it's that defined moment in a 10-minute ride taking our grandkids to school. And we remember how we did this with our own children, and that was a long time ago, and it was all over much too fast. So this time with our granddaughter becomes all the more precious. Or maybe it's when we get some crazy news at the doctor's, and all of a sudden we have to decide, how to react. Like Catherine Coulson deciding to call the mortuary herself. I remember an older woman in a church I once served who had an appointment with her doctor following some cognitive tests. Her whole family went along, all 8 of them. The doc said, "Mrs. Hunter, I'm afraid the tests are conclusive. All indications are that you have Alzheimer's disease." Well, she took a moment. She looked around at everyone, and then she said, I don't see this as my problem. And what she was saying was that by the time the symptoms would get really bad, she wouldn't even know it. Well, like my friend Catherine, it was her way of trying to soften the blow for the one she loved. It broke the ice. She grabbed the moment, filled it with some humor, a little grace, and it's what we all marveled at years later when we attended her memorial service. Life is full of these pregnant moments. There's a wonderful character, in the film Field of Dreams. He's played by Burt Lancaster. His name in the movie is Archibald Moonlight Graham, and he's a doctor. But once, long ago, he was a two-bit baseball professional who got to play one inning of baseball in the major leagues. And here's the deal. He never got up to bat. His career amounted to playing that one inning out there in the field. In the movie, he tells the Kevin Costner character this. He says, we just don't recognize the most significant moments of our lives when they're happening. Back then, I thought, well, there'll be other days. I didn't realize that was the only day. Moments like that one go, I think, a long way to defining a life. They tend, upon reflection, to wake you up. They can make you think the way Jesus is thinking in this morning's text from the Gospel of Mark when he says, "Now is the time." He says that partly because now is all we got. Time passes. It gives us two lessons. One, time is unstoppable. And two, every moment can be about love. I think that's why most of us live to be grandparents. The profound loving and losing that is the core curriculum of life takes 4 to 7 decades, punctuated by 3 generations to play it all out properly. My daughter's 35 now, but I have a book, that marks her first words, her first steps, her first tastes. Why then can't I remember the last time I carried her upstairs to bed? The last time she called me daddy? Last time I read a picture book to her? I can't remember because back then I didn't know it was the last time. If I'd known, would I have wept? Marked the moment with an extra kiss? Held her closer, longer? You remember any last times? Or let me rephrase that. Do you ever remember waking up last time that would have passed had you not noticed? Because this stuff happens all the time. From time to time, I've spoken to you about Houston Smith, a wonderful scholar of world's religions who was also a Christian. Late in life, he wrote a lovely book called The Soul of Christianity, Restoring the Great Tradition. And in that book, he observed that the people who heard Jesus' disciples proclaiming good news were impressed as much by what they saw as by the word that they heard. His followers were in awe of this man they walked with in the Galilee region of Palestine. The gospel writer Mark remarks on that. As a result, they had been transformed, changed by just being with him. They became new people. Smith concludes that it was love that did that. He said God's love was precisely what the first Christians felt. They experienced firsthand Jesus' love and became convinced that his love was in some way intimately connected to God, their creator. Once that love reached them, it couldn't be stopped. He goes on to propose that just as the power hidden in the atom is only released by bombardment, of rays from without, so the love planted by God in every human soul is released and activated and called out by bombardments of love in the flesh. I like that idea. He says, a loving human being is not produced by exhortations, rules, or threats. Not at all. He says, love takes root in children only when it comes to them, embraces them, envelops them. I've been so lucky to have been around lots of children all my professional life. I've mentioned before that I was once asked if I wanted to pastor a church about 5 times the size of this one, where everyone in it was 55 years of age or older. And I said, no, thank you. Not because I don't love older people. Of course I love older people. I am one. But because I think a church to be a church has to have children in it. They give us all purpose and reason to be church. Houston Smith says there is a great moment when the connection of love between generations happens. He says you can't just say to a baby, I'm glad you're here and I like you a lot, and hope that he or she understands. No, what do? We whistle, we make funny noises, we sing songs, we talk baby talk, and in doing that, we bombard these little ones with beams of love. I can see in little videos my daughter posts on Facebook how she's doing the same exact thing with her daughters, and I can see how love in return is called out of my granddaughters by that kind of hourly showering of adoration. This is the best metaphor for the divine human encounter. Reverend John Buchanan put it this way. He said, Lent begins with Jesus in the desert, dry, hungry, alone, maybe full of doubt and misgivings about his own life and his prospects, maybe full of uncertainty about what he's supposed to do next, maybe tired of the daily routine of his life, bored, maybe feeling alienated from his family, maybe feeling distant from and impatient and alienated from God too. But angels come and minister to him, bombarding the vulnerable Jesus with beams of God's love. And he learns that there is nowhere he can go, even the driest, loneliest desert, that God's steadfast love cannot find him and come to him and embrace him and hold him and then call out of him his own fierce, unconditional love, his own love that will take him to the crisis of Good Friday and his cross and death, still loving to the last, still willing to live his life, every minute of it, right up to the last one moment, loving his friends, you and me, the whole wide world, answering God's steadfast, faithful love. How do you measure a life? How about love? As I said, love's expressed best when we seize a moment, make eye contact with someone. Let them know with a look, a gesture, a word that they are special to us. Well, 51,829 minutes are left in Lent, this holy season. There are some things we can give up this season. People do that in Lent. But I imagine there are also some things we can dedicate ourselves to. Now is the time, said Jesus. It's all we got. Let's maybe not let this chance to love and receive love be squandered. Amen.